North Korea just released a new statement, and in it they say that President Trump, quote, let out a load of nonsense about fire and fury, and that dialogue is not possible with such a guy bereft of reason. It appears North Korea is not yet ready to talk. Elaine?
Well, Ben, the Chinese government responded to CBS News saying, in part, quote, the situation on the Korean peninsula is highly sensitive. We hope the parties will be cautious with words and behavior and stop provoking each other and avoid escalation. That's a pretty calculated statement. What can you tell us about how China is viewing this conflict between the U.S. and North Korea?
Well, that response very much fits with how China has responded to this for many months now. They have been very measured, have consistently said they want both parties to tone it down. China really does fear that if this spirals into some conflict on the Korean peninsula, it'll be a real problem for China. They share a border with North Korea. There could be a refugee crisis, and certainly they don't want to see American troops in North Korea, which would put American troops on their border. So China is trying to play the role of intermediary here, of saying, tone it down, start talking to each other, and cut out the threats.
Well, how did President Trump's harsh warning on Tuesday affect the relationship between the U.S. and China as it relates to the two countries working together?
It's hard to tell from the outside, but you can't imagine it sat very well with the Chinese. You know, think about this. Just a couple of days ago, they went along with these U.S.-led sanctions, which is something China has historically been reluctant to do. They did that, and then just a couple days later, you have President Trump throwing a lot of fuel on this fire that North Korea has been trying to tamp down. And keep in mind also that that China is really going to be the one responsible for enforcing these sanctions. So it is in the U.S.'s, it does make sense for the U.S. to encourage China to do that and to not make this any more difficult for them than it already is.
Ben, I also want to ask about South Korea. What more can you tell us about how the South is reacting to President Trump's ratcheting up of the rhetoric?
It's hard to know if South Korea is reacting to President Trump's rhetoric, or more so if they're reacting to the escalating threat from North Korea. The president of South Korea, the new president there, Moon Jae-in, has reversed himself and has said that he now will allow the U.S. to fully deploy the anti-missile defense system known as THAAD in his country. He has also called for a complete overhaul of the South Korean military. So what you're seeing now is almost a mini arms race in Asia. You have lawmakers in Japan who are also calling for new weapons, for the ability to launch a preemptive strike, which is not something Japan has historically done. It's almost unprecedented because their post-World War II constitution basically calls for simply a defensive military, not an offensive one.
Well, finally, Ben, North Korea will celebrate its Liberation Day next week. If it uses that as an opportunity to conduct another missile test, might any of these nations in the region change their stance or feel the need to issue a stronger response?
Yeah, North Korea has often used some of its major holidays as an opportunity to launch a missile or to do a nuclear test. If they were to launch another missile, certainly you would see more response from the world community, which is now basically united against North Korea on these missile launches. If they were to take the opportunity to do their 6th nuclear test, that would certainly ratchet this thing up. That is different from what they have done this past year when they have launched more than a dozen missiles. So certainly if that were to happen, I think you'd see some sort of strong or different response from the international community.
All right, Ben Tracy in Beijing. Ben, thanks very much.